Hello everybody, my name is DoomFish, and in today's episode of the Redstone Toolbox, we're going to be going over possibly one of the least understood components in Minecraft, and that is going to be the Redstone Comparator. So it's actually quite simple what this thing does. There's only a couple of operations, and they're all pretty self-explanatory, and there's only a couple different settings you actually have the comparator block on, so yeah, let's just show you what the comparator block does. So first off, to craft a comparator, all you need to do is put 3 stone on the bottom here, put your torches in a sort of triangle shape like so, and put some nether quartz in the middle, and you've got your comparator. So with the first application of comparators, there's actually quite a big similarity between the comparator and the repeater, in that they block signals from coming into the front here. So if you see, we were to break this block, we see this is off, we power this side, this redstone dust doesn't get powered, do the same thing to the repeater over here, and we can see that the same situation happens. Now, something where it's different is that you can see that these redstone lines are 10 dust long, and remember that our output strength here is 15. So with the repeater, this block is 5, it hits the repeater, and it goes back to full power. But the comparator actually does not reset the power to full power. It just keeps whatever pulse length is behind it, or whatever pulse strength, rather. So if we have the debug menu, we can see this power is labeled 6, and on the backside is labeled 6. So it will actually maintain the pulse strength of whatever signal is directly behind it. Now, in its default mode, that is when you do not right-click on this comparator, the front torch is off, and this means it is in compare mode, and what that means is that if you have any pulse from either of these two left or right sides, you can actually compare it to the pulse strength of the pulse behind it. So let's say we have a torch here and a torch here. Then this pulse right here has a strength of 14, and this one has a strength of 15. So what happens is the comparator will actually go ahead and say that this strength behind is greater than this strength to the side, so it will go ahead and output whatever pulse is behind it. And so we can see is that even if the pulses are equal, like so, it'll still output the same strength. So these pulses are equal, but let's say that the pulse from behind it is less than, we can see that even though this is a 14 tick pulse or a 14 signal strength pulse, no pulse is going out here because the comparator is, as in the name, it's comparing these two pulses and it sees that this one on the left is greater than the one behind it, so it doesn't give any outputs. And this is true no matter what side you put it on. So for example, you could have this here, it doesn't really do anything. We can get rid of this, and again, it then says this is 14 signal strength, this is 13, so this is greater, so it gives out a pulse in the front. Now if we had this set up from earlier, we can actually switch modes by right-clicking this, and now it is in subtract mode. So you didn't see any difference here, but now instead of comparing the two pulses and only giving an output equal to the pulse behind it if it is greater than the pulses coming in from the side, this mode will actually subtract all the pulses from the side. So what we can have is we can have a 15th signal strength pulse, and we can have a 14 one from the side, and you can actually see that this comparator is on and giving out a pulse with signal strength of 1. This will actually compare your signals, and you can do this from a couple of different sources, like you can have a repeater coming on the side, you can have another comparator, you can have dust, or you can even have like a powered block in here, and you can even see that, like, let's say we extend this out even more, we can see that it's subtracting this 15 signal strength pulse and this 10 signal strength pulse, and we should get a 5 pulse out of here. Now, the last use of comparators here is probably the one you're most familiar with, is that the comparator can measure whether it's in the compare or subtract state, how full the container is behind it. And so we can go ahead and let's just fill this thing up completely. We can see this comparator gives out a strength of 15. We can see that we extend this all the way out. It's 15, that one's off. This is 15 redstone dust that way. And you can see that if we actually take some of these comparators out of here, we can see that the signal strength will actually decrease. So it will measure how many items are in this container right here. Now, different containers will also respond differently to the amount of items that are in them. Let's say we put a stack in this chest right here, we only get a signal strength of 1. But if we put a stack of items in this furnace right here, we get a signal strength of about 5. And this is because the total amount of space in this furnace is a lot smaller than in the chest. So it basically measures the percentage of items that are in here. So if we have 1 out of 27 slots filled, that's about 4% filled. But if we have 1 out of 3 slots filled here, then this is about 33% full. So it gives off 33% of its max pulse, and this gives off roughly 4% of its max pulse. But of course, it rounds a little bit, and it'll round up to this 1 tick, or 1 signal strength pulse right here. So a few more things about the measure feature of these comparators is that they will actually measure things that aren't containers, like for example, the page of the book you're on. Let's say we go to page 6, we can actually see that the signal strength is in fact 6, and also we can see that the comparator will actually measure things not only that it's right next to, so we could put a comparator like right here, Well, we can also put a comparator, or put a solid block between the comparator and whatever we're measuring here. And then also, we have plenty more examples, like even things you would never expect, which is things like the cake. So when the cake is full, it gives off full strength, but if we eat some of it right here, the pulse will actually decrease, which is pretty crazy. And there are a few more examples of things like this, which are quite strange, and you might not always expect it. Like I think music or jukebox give off different outputs depending on what music disc is in there. But all that information can be found on the wiki page of Minecraft comparators, and I'll put that in the description below. So now that we cover most of the actual uses of comparators, let's talk about some of the applications those functions have. And the two of the most common things that I build with comparators are the redstone clock using comparators and the redstone pulse extender. So if you look at the clock, you've probably, if you've seen any of my videos or my redstone tutorials, you've definitely seen a couple of these contraptions before. All it is a comparator in subtract mode, heading into a sort of loop of repeaters, all set to 4 ticks. And the way this works is that it will actually subtract the pulse that's behind it, which is a 15 strength pulse, and the pulse to the side of it, which is another 15 strength pulse, and it will subtract those two numbers, and it will get a 0 pulse out of the front, or, in other words, it won't give off a pulse. So basically alternates between giving off a pulse and not giving off a pulse for the duration of this timer. Now if you look at the pulse extender, this actually takes advantage of the fact that the comparators will copy whatever signal strength is behind them. So we hit the button, and we see that the button just was released, and these pulses on here will slowly decrease. So basically what's happening is that since these comparators actually have a 1 redstone tick delay, which again is 0.1 seconds, then they'll actually just like funnel into each other over and over until they eventually run out of pulse. So it's slowly decreasing as it's going around, and we can actually do that a little better with the target blocks that were introduced in Minecraft 1.16. And so basically what this does is that this will actually extend the pulse extender timer by 2, so that we actually have double the length here, and that's because instead of having 2 redstone dust here, which actually has slightly different pulse, so like for example if this number was like 15 coming out of here, this one would be 14. um, since it's pointing into a block, this one's 15, and the block is powered with a strength of 15, so it will actually decrease less, and it will only actually decrease on this side. For example, if we were actually to have 2 target blocks here, the pulse extender would never ever decrease. It's always going to stay at 15 strength right here, even though this button is no longer being pushed. So just to recap, the comparators will maintain whatever signal strength is behind them, and they will also not allow a pulse in front of them to travel sort of backwards, similar to repeaters do. Also, they have a compare and a subtract feature that can be changed by right-clicking this, and basically this changes between comparing the pulse to the side and the pulse behind it, and subtracting and finding the difference between the two. Comparators can also measure the fullness of containers that are placed directly behind them, and they can also measure the states of some other blocks, such as lecterns, cakes, things like cauldrons, brewing stands, and even jukeboxes. And also, this function works through a solid block, so we can have a little bit of space here. So that's going to do it for today's episode of the Redstone Toolbox. I hope you found all of this information about the comparator very interesting and informative. Again, there are a lot of other uses of the comparator. You can do it to make tons and tons of redstone circuits, but these are the basic functions that it uses and that sort of enables those applications later on in the redstone sort of progression. So if you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like, and you can also subscribe for more content just like this in the future, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.